In a study, 6 medical students were each separately presented with the same patient whose symptoms could be the result of any one of several medical conditions. The attending physician asked each student a leading question of the form, "What test should we order to try to rule out a diagnosis of X?" where X was filled with a different medical condition for each student. A week later, each student was presented with a patient having similar symptoms in the presence of a different attending physician who asked for a diagnosis without asking any leading questions. Each student began by testing the diagnosis that had been suggested by the original attending physician.
Okay, so what's going on in the first two sentences?
6 medical students were separately presented with the same patient that had symptoms, which could have been any one of several medical conditions. And then the attending asked each student a leading question of what test should we try in order to rule out a diagnosis of X, where X was a different medical condition for each student.
Excellent. So yeah, he tested on something different, right?
Yeah.
Awesome. All right. And so then what about these next two sentences?
And then a week later, the same students were presented with a patient with similar symptoms with a different attending physician who asked for a diagnosis without any questions. And each student began testing the diagnosis that had been suggested by the original attending physician.
Awesome. So what do you feel like happened here? Like, what do you feel like this is like what's supported by that? Like, what's kind of like your prediction, what you can infer?
What I got from that was each student kind of knew what to test for or what not to test for.
Why do you think the students started with the diagnosis that they were asked about previously? Like if like they so like essentially like each student was given them a different diagnosis, like given them a different like what like in order for diagnose X, so each student had a different medical condition.
Right.
So then whenever they were given a patient with similar symptoms as before, why did they each start testing based on what or like they had done previously?
Because they knew what to look for. Right. Is that what?
Were they, well, do we know that they were right?
No, we don't know, but they knew kind of what
I feel
to.
like it was preempted, right? Like it's like
Yeah.
whenever you're learning about like correlation causation, like your first gut is going to be like, oh, let's check correlation causation, right? Because it's like top of mind is kind of what I'm thinking. But let's go ahead and start with A. So which of the following is most strongly supported? So let's see. Can we is this strongly supported by the evidence? So go ahead and read A.
On the second occasion, none of the medical students began by testing the same diagnosis as any of the other medical students. Yes, that can be supported. Because they all had different diagnosis. They were all given a different diagnosis.
Yeah.
So
Maybe this was just a misread.
yeah, that makes sense.
All right, what answer did you pick?
I ended up picking D.
Okay, so on the second occasion, exactly one of the students tested for the medical conditions that actually caused, do we know that it actually caused the patient's symptoms?
No.
Not at all. Yep.
No.
Hopefully, but maybe not. Awesome.